hush of wind. Soft grass brushing a hem. A bell, one single, silver ring. Then a cat's quiet paw step, as if the night itself had learned to walk. I moved to the countryside on a Wednesday I can no longer place on a calendar. The city had been a room full of alarms. Out here, the clocks keep their opinions to themselves. The cottage is small, 2 windows, one creaking door, a table pale as the moon when it is tired. I thought silence would cure everything. It almost did. On my first night, I left the window cracked open for the wind to find me. The air smelled faintly of hay and clean water. Somewhere in the fields something chimed so soft I wasn't sure it happened. When I blew out the candle, the darkness didn't fall. It drifted down like a shawl someone kindly placed on my shoulders. Sleep did not arrive, not yet. Insomnia is a gentle thief. It doesn't break the lock, only lingers at the threshold until you forget how to close the door. I counted breaths, not sheep. I told my heartbeat that I believed in it. I listened to the leaves practice their night language. And then I heard it, the bell again. A single note, silver and certain. I sat up. The mist at the window was the kind that belongs to meadows, the kind that keeps secrets without malice. A shape appeared on the sill, a small cat, gray and white, with legs a little shorter than expected, and eyes the color of early tea. A red ribbon lay soft against its throat. The bell was no bigger than a thumbprint. "Hello," I whispered, because the night had asked for quiet. "Are you lost?" The cat blinked like a priest, considering a prayer. Then it hopped inside with the confidence of someone who already owned the place. It circled my pillow once, twice, then sat, tail around paws, looking at me as if I had arrived late to an appointment we both understood. "Do you have a name?" I asked. The bell answered with the smallest ring. I thought of matchas lined in a bakery window, pale and soft, dusted with a sweet that knows how to forgive. "Mochi," I said. The cat approved by closing its eyes halfway, a ceremony of acceptance. Mochi touched my wrist with one pono claw, only warmth, and then looked toward the door. The message was clear, the way starlight is clear when you finally bother to look up. I put on my coat. I didn't take a lantern. The night had promised to be kind. Outside, the grass kept a memory of the day's heat. The mist lifted itself in small breaths, like a curtain someone was reluctant to open too quickly. Mochi trotted ahead, bell quiet unless the world needed to hear us coming. We crossed the yard, stepped through a gap in the hedgerow, and entered the meadow. This is the part I would not have believed if I hadn't been the one inside it. The grass gave off a light that did not hurt the eyes. Not bright, just present, like the glow around words spoken with care. The air held a gentle sound, as if a river were sleeping and dreaming of being a river. Every few steps, a stem brushed my fingertips, and left a coolness that felt like starting over. "Is this your place?" I asked Mochi. The bell gave no answer. Instead, he led me to a space where the grasses leaned outward in a patient circle. At the center lay a flat stone, smooth as a lullaby. I sat. Mochi curled beside me, a small moon that purrs. I closed my eyes because it seemed polite to the dark. In the city, closing my eyes had always been an argument with light. Here it was a conversation with air. My thoughts arrived. But the meadow had rules I did not know I knew. Each thought must pass through the grass and return softened. Edges rounded off by dew. Worries changed shape. To-do lists lost their verbs. Even regret consented to sit a little farther away. When I opened my eyes again, I saw something that might have been stars, except they rose from the ground. Seeds, maybe lifting on the smallest wind, carrying little lamps of themselves. They passed over my knees and kept going toward a horizon that had the good sense not to end. A voice spoke then, near and not near, and I recognized it as my own thinking, finally saying what it meant. "You have come where the night remembers your better name." "My better name?" I said, almost laughing. "What would that be?" Mochi nudged my hand with his head. In the push, I heard it, a word without sound, a syllable that belonged to before worry learned how to speak. Not a name I had used in any city. Just the feeling of being called, gently, correctly. Something unknotted in my chest. It didn't come loose all at once. It yielded the way string yields to patient fingers. I breathed. The breath went deeper than habit and came back carrying a little light. The flat stone held my weight, as if it had been set there for me, long before I knew I would need it. I lay back. The grasses above made a ceiling of green and silver. The mist arranged itself so I could see through it without having to try. Far away, an owl considered our presence and found it harmless. I thought of the old apartment, the windows that faced other windows, the elevator that sighed like a tired violin, the calendar that felt like a narrow hallway. I thought of the sleepless nights that insisted on being mine. Then I thought of nothing for a while, which is a new way of thinking if you've never learned it. Thank you, I told Mochi. He made the sound cats make when they agree with the moon. When the wind changed, a sweetness arrived, wild mint, crushed by nobody, volunteering its comfort. It lingered on my tongue, a promise with no deadline. My limbs forgot the trick of bracing for impact. The stone kept me, the meadow held me. The night forgave me for every hard word I had spoken to myself. I do not know how long I stayed there. Time, in the meadow, behaved itself. When I finally sat up, the stars that were seeds had floated on, and the mist had learned a looser way to be. Mochi stood, shook sleep from his whiskers, and looked toward the path home. Will we come back? I asked. He didn't ring the bell this time. He didn't need to. Some places become doors only once you know where they are. After that, they're part of your pocket. Like a key you stop noticing because it always works. We walked back across the grass. At the hedge, the night gathered itself politely, and we stepped through. The cottage waited with its shy windows. Inside, the bed had remembered my shape. I lay down without performing any rituals for sleep, no bargaining, no counting, no apology. Mochi settled where a book might have been, warm and steady. Just before the last thought faded, I felt the bell, somewhere near my ear, ring the smallest ring. Not a sound, but a circle closing. You are safe. And for the first time in longer than I can measure, I slept as if sleep were a meadow, and I had learned its path. Soft rain. A droplet lands on a leaf and waits, trembling. Then another joins, and another, until the whole night becomes a slow heartbeat made of water. The next morning woke me with the sound of something kind. Rain had arrived without asking permission. It wasn't a storm, just the sort of gentle drizzle that makes you remember you are inside, warm and dry. I stayed in bed longer than usual. Mochi was already awake, sitting by the window like a poet, observing the punctuation of raindrops. His bell didn't ring. Even sound had chosen to rest. When I finally rose, I made tea. The steam wrote small, invisible letters on the cold air. I imagined they said, "You're doing fine. Keep breathing." Outside, the meadow looked different. The rain painted every blade of grass with clarity, as if the world had decided to sharpen its focus. Between the drops, I could see tiny glimmers like yesterday's dream, refusing to dissolve. Mochi meowed once, a sound halfway between question and memory. "Do you want to go out?" I asked. He turned his head slightly, the way one might tilt a thought before deciding it's worth having. I put on my raincoat and opened the door. The air touched my face like a cool hand. Mochi stepped out first, paws almost not touching the ground. The grass bent beneath him and rose again, forgivingly. The meadow had changed colors. Yesterday's silver green had become a deeper hue, full of patience. Each raindrop caught a bit of daylight, carrying it down slowly, like light learning to fall. I followed Mochi to the flat stone where we had sat. Rain made a quiet applause on its surface. I sat again. The stone remembered me. Sometimes I think places hold us more gently than people do. They ask for nothing except presence. They do not interrupt when we are quiet. Mochi circled twice, then lay down, tail over his nose. The rain didn't bother him. I think he trusted that every drop knew where to land. I watched the horizon fade into mist. In that blur, time didn't disappear, it simply stopped demanding to be noticed. A voice in my head asked softly, "What did you leave behind in the city?" I didn't answer right away. Maybe I had left behind the version of me who thought rest must be earned. The one who counted every minute as currency. The one who mistook silence for emptiness. Here, silence had texture. You could run your fingers through it and feel the threads of wind and water interwoven, alive. I took a slow breath and whispered, "Maybe I left behind noise, not life." The rain replied by easing, almost approving. Mochi opened one eye. He seemed to smile the way cats do without moving their mouths, only their entire being. He stood, stretched, and walked toward the tall reeds at the edge of the meadow. I followed, careful not to disturb the tiny puddles forming like mirrors of soft light. Beyond the reeds was a small pond I hadn't seen before. It must have been hidden until the rain revealed it. The surface was so still that sky and water seemed to exchange places. Mochi sat at the pond's edge, his reflection perfectly aligned with himself. The red ribbon floated gently in the damp breeze. I knelt beside him. My reflection trembled in the ripples he made with one paw. I looked older and calmer than I expected. Maybe the meadow adjusted mirrors to show not who you are, but who you're becoming. Somewhere behind us, the wind turned a page in the air. I thought of my sketchbook, still empty on the table. I hadn't drawn since I arrived. Every time I tried, my hands felt too heavy, as if the paper might hear my thoughts and decide they weren't worth keeping. Now, watching the pond, I felt that weight dissolve. The colors of the meadow, the deep greens, the muted silver, the soft grays were waiting to be remembered. Tomorrow, I told Mochi, I'll start again. He flicked his tail once, a gentle punctuation mark at the end of a sentence. When we returned to the cottage, the rain had slowed to a hush. I made another cup of tea, not to drink but to watch the steam rise. Mochi leaped onto the bed and began his small ritual of turning in circles until comfort found him. I sat by the window and let my eyes wander. The meadow blurred into watercolor through the glass. I didn't fight sleep when it came. I let it approach like a tide I trusted to know its way. As I drifted, I heard one last sound, the bell, barely moving, its tone folding gently into the rain. It wasn't saying goodbye. It was saying rest. A slow heartbeat. A candle sighs out. The sound of a key turning, though there is no lock. Then silence gentle, like breath wrapped in velvet. I woke not because of noise, but because of calm. It was the kind of waking where you aren't sure if you've slept, or simply drifted through a quieter layer of being. The air carried a scent of rain left behind, a sweetness made of nothing in particular. Mochi was still sleeping beside me, paws curled under his chin, a small question mark of fur and warmth. His bell rested against my blanket, silent but ready. The window showed the meadow washed in faint morning blue. Mist still lingered, slow and affectionate, refusing to leave before I noticed it. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for me to decide whether to dream again or to wake fully. I didn't decide. I just listened. There was a rhythm in the air, not quite music, not quite heartbeat, like something invisible was gently knocking from the inside of the world. I got up, barefoot, and opened the door. The grass outside glistened. Dew made constellations of ordinary things. Mochi followed without question. He never asked where we were going, because maybe he already knew. We walked toward the meadow, though this morning it seemed larger, deeper, as if it had dreamed of itself during the night. Each step felt slower, the ground soft as thought. The light filtered through the mist in long, golden strands, almost tangible like strings of a harp, waiting for wind to play them. We reached the center, where the flat stone waited. But something new had appeared beside it, a wooden door, standing alone, unconnected to any wall or frame. The wood was pale, almost translucent, edges damp with dew. Its handle looked worn, like it had been turned by many hands. Mochi stopped. His bell gave a single, questioning chime. "It wasn't here before," I said softly. The cat tilted his head, as if to say that depends on what you mean by before. I stepped closer. The door wasn't frightening, only curious. I touched it, and the wood felt alive, like a pulse just beneath its surface. There was no keyhole, no sign of a lock. Yet when I brushed my fingers along the edge, I heard that same faint sound from my dream, a key turning somewhere inside. "Should we open it?" I whispered. Mochi blinked once, then sat, tail wrapped neatly, the universal sign of feline neutrality. Whatever was on the other side, he seemed to trust it. I pressed the handle. It yielded without resistance. Beyond the door, there was no room, only a gentle brightness, neither sun nor flame. It shimmered, not outward, but inward, folding the light as if it were remembering how to be warm. I took one breath and stepped through. The first sensation was silence that moved, like water touched by thought. The air carried a hush that listened back. The ground beneath me was still the meadow, yet softer, dreamlike, the colors breathing with every exhale. And then I heard it. A voice that wasn't sound but memory. "You've been here before," it said, not accusing, only stating what the world already knew. I looked around, but no one was there, only strands of light, bending gently as if in greeting. I asked. "When you stopped believing that rest is absence," it answered. "You come here each time you remember how to be kind to yourself." I felt my throat tighten, not from fear, but from recognition. How many years had I filled with noise, mistaking exhaustion for purpose? The light touched my hands. It was warm, not hot, not cold, just the right temperature to remind me I was alive. In it, I saw faint shapes, a desk, a sketchbook, a younger version of myself, sitting before both, smiling in a way I hadn't in years. Mochi brushed against my leg. When I looked down, he was looking not at me, but at that younger self. His bell gave a tiny ring, and the scene shimmered like ripples over truth. The girl in the vision raised her head and smiled at me. "You kept drawing," she said softly, voice overlapping mine. I nodded. "Not yet. But I will." "That's enough," she whispered. Then her image faded into light, leaving warmth where she had been. Mochi leaped up onto the stone beside me, curling into the same small shape as always. I sat beside him, feeling both heavy and light at once. The brightness began to dim, not disappearing but blending back into the ordinary air of the meadow. The door behind me stayed open for a while longer, letting the two worlds breathe together. Then the breeze changed, and the door closed gently by itself, like a sigh returning home. I didn't feel loss, only peace, the kind that comes when nothing needs explaining. Mochi looked at me and meowed once, the kind of sound that says, "See, you remembered." We walked back slowly, each step dissolving a little more of the dream into morning. By the time we reached the cottage, sunlight had arrived, thin, shy, golden around the edges. I made tea again, because that's what you do when you've touched something too sacred to name. You pour water, you hold warmth, you breathe. Mochi sat by the window, his eyes half closed. His bell gave one last, delicate sound as he drifted into sleep. Outside, the door was gone. Or maybe it had only gone invisible. A kettle hums softly. A brush glides over paper. Then a window opens, the sound of light entering. Morning arrived gently, the way water returns to the shore without apology, without noise. I woke before the alarm, though there was no alarm to wake from. The air smelled faintly of wet wood and tea. Mochi was already awake, perched on the windowsill. His fur caught the early gold of sunlight, turning it into something softer. His bell was stilled, perhaps, even sound was taking its time to wake. I made tea and watched the steam wander toward the ceiling, drawing invisible paths. Somewhere in that white motion, I thought of last night's door, the one that stood between dreams. It had vanished, but its peace had stayed. On the table lay my sketchbook, still closed but not forgotten. I traced its cover with one finger, feeling the quiet pulse of intention beneath. When I opened it, the pages greeted me with their patience. The paper didn't ask for brilliance, only presence. I dipped the brush into water, and the first stroke felt like breathing, slow, deliberate, forgiving. Colors began to bloom, gentle greens, muted grays, a hint of silver where the mist might rest. The meadow appeared without effort, as if it had been waiting for me to remember how to see. Mochi watched, tail flicking occasionally like a conductor's baton. His eyes moved between the page and me, calm, approving. Outside, the world was still waking. The rain from yesterday had left small mirrors in the grass. Sunlight touched them one by one, and for a brief moment, it looked as if the ground itself had learned to shine from within. I kept painting until the lines stopped mattering and the space between them became part of the story. Sometimes, when I lifted the brush, I could hear the meadow breathing with me. There is a rhythm to peace, I realized. It doesn't demand silence. It simply teaches you how to listen. Mochi leaped down and brushed against my leg. I smiled. "Yes," I said. It feels different now. He meowed once, soft and short, and walked toward the door. I followed. Outside, the sky had the color of early forgiveness. The air was cool, wrapping around my hands like silk. The meadow stretched endlessly, and in its quiet, I could almost hear the echo of the dream door closing behind me. We wandered toward the pond. Its surface reflected clouds shaped like feathers. The water no longer mirrored my face exactly, it seemed to mirror my calm instead. I sat by the pond, the same place where yesterday's reflection had trembled. Today it held stillness without effort. Mochi curled beside me, his small frame rising and falling with each breath. A soft breeze brushed through the reeds, and for a moment it sounded like words half remembered. You are here now. That's enough. I let my eyes close. Behind them, the light turned to warmth, and the warmth turned to sleep again, not the heavy kind, but the peaceful drift between waking and dreaming. Somewhere between thought and breath, I heard the bell once more, one soft note, fading like a promise fulfilled. A curtain sways. Wind sighs through half-open windows. The sound of sunlight settling, like dust made of gold. By afternoon, the cottage had learned silence again. The rain had gone, leaving the air soft as cloth. I sat by the window, tea cooling slowly in my hands. Outside, the meadow shimmered under a lazy sun, the kind of light that doesn't insist on being seen. It simply exists, like kindness that asks for nothing. Mochi slept on the chair beside me, curled into an impossible smallness, his red ribbon catching every breath of wind. Sometimes, his bell made the tiniest sound, barely a note, more like a memory of one. The pages I had painted earlier were drying on the table. The colors had softened as they rested like emotions that, after being spoken, no longer needed to be loud. I thought about how mornings bloom and afternoons fade, not as opposites, but as the same gesture in different time. Maybe that's what healing is like, learning to rest, instead of shine. The breeze entered through the half-open window, playing with the curtain. It brushed my cheek like a slow question. Are you still waiting for something? It seemed to ask. I smiled. No, I whispered. Not anymore. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was between things, between work and rest. Noise and silence, wanting and having. I was simply here. The sound of insects hummed low in the field. The rhythm was steady, hypnotic, like the earth breathing in its sleep. Mochi stretched, one paw reaching toward a beam of light that had fallen across the floor. His whiskers twitched. His dream must have been kind. I lowered the teacup and watched a droplet slide down its side. It caught a small rainbow in the process, a fragile prism that lasted less than a second. But it was enough. Sometimes beauty doesn't need to stay. Sometimes it only visits to remind you that you still notice. The clock on the wall ticked softly, but not urgently. Time had forgotten to chase itself. I closed my eyes. Behind my lids, the sunlight became warmth again. The warmth turned to color, and the color turned to quiet. When I breathed in, the air smelled faintly of mint, and something older, perhaps memory. I thought of the door from my dream. Maybe it had never truly disappeared. Maybe it only turned invisible when I no longer needed it. Because now, every moment felt like a door. The sip of tea, the hum of bees, the silence between heartbeats. And each one opened into the same place, the present, unguarded and kind. Mochi stirred. His bell rang once, clear but soft, like light landing on water. He opened his eyes and looked at me. Then he blinked slowly, the universal language of trust. I leaned back, the chair creaking quietly beneath me. Outside, the meadow glowed, grass leaning into wind, sky spilling into gold. For a long time, nothing happened. And that, I realized, was everything I needed. A single candle flickers. A window opens to the sound of crickets. Then, a soft sigh like the world exhaling. Night doesn't arrive here. It returns, like an old friend who knows not to knock. By the time the last light faded from the meadow, the world had already lowered its voice. I lit one candle. Its flame leaned and steadied, as if breathing with me. Mochi lay by the door, paws tucked neatly under his chest, his bell dim in the shadow. Outside, the air shimmered with quiet. The stars were shy tonight, hiding behind a thin curtain of clouds. The moon, gentle and patient, painted the mist silver. I sat on the floor beside the bed, back against the wall. The wood was cool but kind, carrying a trace of warmth left from the day. The tea from afternoon had gone cold. I didn't mind. Even cooling is a kind of transformation, like memory turning into peace. Mochi stretched, then padded over and climbed into my lap. His weight was small but grounding, like a heartbeat you can hold. He looked up once, eyes catching the candlelight, and then closed them, trust complete. The flame moved softly, its light touching the ceiling in a rhythm that reminded me of waves. The whole room seemed to breathe with us-wall air, and silence moving in slow harmony. Somewhere beyond the window, the meadow rested. The grasses no longer swayed, they only listened. It occurred to me then that perhaps everything in the world was listening to us, to itself, to the gentle sound of existing. When I breathed out, I could almost feel the night breathing back. I used to be afraid of nights, I whispered. They felt endless. Mochi's tail brushed my arm, as if to say, they still are, but now, they're endless in a kind way. I smiled. Yes, I said. Endless doesn't have to mean lonely. The candle crackled once, like agreement. A slow calm spread from my chest outward, as though my heartbeat was learning to rest inside the dark. The clock ticked faintly steady. Each sound marked not the passing of time, but its soft permission to stay. I thought of the city again, the apartment where nights were thin and restless. The hum of machines, the glow of screens, the sense that rest was something earned instead of allowed. Here, rest felt like language. A word the meadow whispered fluently. I closed my eyes. The sounds of night gathered around me, the quiet chirp of crickets, the faint rustle of leaves, the purr beneath my hand. Every sound was saying the same thing in a different way. You can stop now. Mochi shifted slightly and pressed closer. His warmth, the rhythm of his breathing, the tiny weight of him, everything anchored me to the present moment. The candle's flame danced lower. Its light turned amber, then honey, then the color of slow fading. I leaned my head back and let the darkness complete its work. If sleep were a tide, I was already waist deep. The last thing I remember was the sound of the bell, barely there, like the night's own heartbeat. It rang once, soft and perfect, and then all things rested. A single note of wind, the soft rustle of grass. Then, a heartbeat, not yours, but the world's. Dreams do not always end. Some only learn to whisper. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't sure whether I had slept or simply drifted deeper into listening. The candle had melted halfway. Mochi was still asleep on my lap, his tiny breaths making the quiet visible. The window was open a little wider than before. Outside, the mist moved like someone walking slowly through memory. I rose carefully, so as not to wake him. The wooden floor greeted my bare feet with the same cool kindness. Stepping outside, I felt the air touch my skin as if it recognized me. The night was still there and broken, patient, whole. The meadow shimmered with dew. Every blade of grass carried a droplet, and every droplet held a star. It felt like walking through someone else's dream, except the dream belonged to everything, not just one heart. The wind passed through and made a sound that wasn't quite music, not quite silence. A sound like remembering, and I realized, the meadow remembers us. Every footprint, every word whispered into its air, becomes a part of its breathing. Even silence leaves an echo, if you stay quiet enough to hear it. I sat on the flat stone again. Its surface was cool but welcoming, as if saying, you made it back. I closed my eyes. Behind them, light gathered not from the moon, but from memory itself. I saw small moments, my first cup of tea here. Mochi's first blink of trust. The sound of rain painting the grass. The door that stood without walls. All of it returned, not as story, but as warmth. And I thought, maybe that's what living is, not holding on, but letting every moment return when it's ready. The wind shifted. I heard something faint, melodic like distant bells, though not from Mochi's collar. It came from the meadow itself, ringing softly under the weight of dew. Each chime sounded like a thought I had once forgotten. You are safe. You are loved. You are here. I let the words sink in without trying to keep them. They were not meant to be owned, only felt. Mochi appeared beside me, quiet as always. He didn't make a sound, yet I knew he was there by the way the air calmed. He sat facing the same horizon, tail curled like a question mark that no longer needed an answer. I reached out, touched his fur. The night moved around us, slow, wide, breathing, and for a moment, I thought I heard the world hum. Not in language, but in love. Then the stars dimmed a little, and I knew morning was on its way. The meadow remembered me, and I, in turn, remembered how to rest. Birdsong in the distance. A faint breeze. Then, the first breath of morning, quiet, deliberate, alive. Light didn't return all at once. It arrived in threads, weaving softly through the mist until color remembered itself. I woke as the world did, slowly, without alarm. The air tasted clean, touched with dew and warmth. Mochi was already awake, sitting near the window, eyes half closed in a kind of feline meditation. His bell caught the new sunlight and gave one small sound, like morning clearing its throat before speaking. Outside, the meadow had changed again. The silver of night had become gold. The quiet had turned to breath. Every blade of grass leaned gently toward the east, as if greeting something it had missed. I opened the door. Cool air met me like memory, familiar, forgiving. Mochi followed, soft steps on the wooden floor. We stood at the edge of the meadow, the same place where dreams used to begin. The stone was warm now. The mist had thinned, and in its place, light spilled quietly, touching everything it met. I sat down, and Mochi climbed into my lap. The world felt freshly washed, no promises, no demands, only presence. For a moment, I thought of all the nights before, of cities, clocks, the endless chase of doing. They felt distant now, like echoes that had finally found a place to rest. I whispered, "Good morning," though it felt more like saying, "Thank you." Mochi blinked slowly, the language of peace. The wind brushed past, carrying with it the scent of mint and rain, and something older, something that might have been love, if love were air. In that stillness, I heard it again. Not a voice, not words, just the sense of being called by name. It wasn't my city name, not the one printed on papers or spoken by strangers. It was the name the light had for me, the one it said each time it touched my face. A name without letters, only warmth, and when it spoke, I felt everything inside me answer. The meadow shimmered once, like a curtain moving between worlds. Then the light grew brighter, not harsh, but full of gentleness, as if it, too, had learned to rest. Mochi looked up, eyes reflecting the sunrise, and in them, I saw the world waking kindly. The bell on his neck rang one last note, clear, soft, the sound of a circle closing. I breathed in. The air was whole again, and somewhere between the inhale and the exhale, I realized, morning remembers us, just as we remember the night. A deep inhale, a soft exhale. Then, the sound of nothing, gentle, complete, whole. There is a moment, just before waking, and just before sleep, where the world holds still, not because it must, but because it knows how to listen. I am in that moment now. The meadow is quiet, the light has folded itself into the soil, resting, waiting to grow again. Mochi sleeps near my hand, his small heart beats steady and kind. The bell no longer rings, but its silence feels like music remembered. Inside me, the world slows. Thoughts dissolve like mist into water. Each breath finds its place. In, out, again. Nothing to chase. Nothing to fix. Only the rhythm of being here. The wooden walls breathe softly. The floor remembers my steps. The air holds a faint trace of mint, and I think this is what peace must smell like. I close my eyes. Behind them, light hums quietly, like the sound of a name that no longer needs to be said aloud. Somewhere far away, a bird calls to morning. Somewhere closer, the night sighs its last sigh. And in between them, this stillness, this place that lives between breaths, the quiet place inside the heart. It does not speak, but it knows. It does not shine, but it remembers. It remembers every small kindness, every forgiven thought, every time I chose to stay and listen. And as I drift, I realize, The meadow, the light, the cat, the calm. They were never outside. They were waiting here all along. In the quiet place inside me. Mochi stirs once, a soft movement, and then stills again. The world holds its breath with me. And together, we fall, not into darkness, but into rest.